So just to introduce myself, my name is Tiffany Clements. I work with Homemade Caregivers. I am their Care Program Development Education and Outreach Specialist, and I'm their on-staff Cares Dementia Specialist. I'm one of 34 in Texas. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the most challenging parts of dementia, which is the dementia-related behaviors and the aggression that can fall along with that. Okay? So we're also going to talk about some things of how to prevent these behaviors the best we can, and just reduce your stress and provide just better care. And I want y'all to leave this with some tips and tricks that you can use, and an understanding that you can use to help you with these behaviors and aggression and to help reduce them. I want to make your jobs easier. That's the whole goal of this in-service, okay? All right, so, hi. So let's just do a little exercise in our mind real quick, all right? So imagine waking up in a place that you do not recognize, and someone you do not know is telling you what to do, okay? You cannot fully understand what is happening around you, and you cannot hear very well, and you cannot see very well, and people keep correcting you and arguing with you, okay? You are rushed, you're touched unexpectedly, and you cannot find your family or anyone that feels familiar or safe. So tell me, how would your body respond in that kind of scenario? How would you feel?
Anxious, scared, angry, negative.
Yes, we would feel all of those things. Any of us would, right? Okay. So exactly, scared, angry, frustrated, confused, maybe defensive. Like, who are you? What are you doing with me? So for many people living with dementia, this can feel like their reality every single day. And sometimes what we call aggression is actually coming from a place of fear. Sometimes it's also confusion. Sometimes it is self-protection. So tell me this, when you hear the words dementia or Alzheimer's disease, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Memory loss.
Memory loss, very good. Confusion, yes. So memory loss, forgetfulness, those are pretty much hallmarks, right? But dementia and Alzheimer's disease, all of those, they cause a full body of changes, okay? So memory loss is part of dementia, but it is one piece of it. So dementia, of course, can affect memory, and it can affect communication, which I'm sure you've seen with your residents. It also affects judgment and decision making. It affects processing information. Also, it affects emotion and behavior regulation, okay, your anxiety, your fear, your frustration, your mood changes. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it also changes perception, okay? So that is our understanding people, understanding objects, and understanding situations, okay? So we're going to do a quick little demonstration of how perception can be changed for those living with Alzheimer's and dementia, okay? So right here we have, what is this? Just a shampoo bottle, right? Just a run-of-the-mill generic shampoo bottle. So let's say you're giving your resident a shower, and they are classically, not wanting to have a shower, right? They're resisting. So we have to think, why are they resisting? There's a number of reasons. We're going to get into all of that. But let's say they see the shampoo bottle, and they're like, don't use that on me. Get that away from me. What are you doing? Okay? In their mind, what we see is just a generic shampoo bottle, okay? In their mind, can be something completely different. Their perception has changed. And it doesn't have to necessarily be something that's fearful or threatening, but a lot of times it is. And so a lot of times resistance comes from a place of fear. But they can also see this, and instead of thinking, oh, shampoo, ooh, shampoo, instead of thinking shampoo, I'm going to wash my hair with it, they might think, oh, juice, I'm going to drink it. Okay? It can change their perception. So let's say you are brushing the teeth of your resident. Just a toothbrush, brushing teeth. You come at them to go and brush the teeth, and they're resistant. They back away. What are you doing? Get that away from my mouth. Get that away from me. Their perception could be that it's something threatening. Would you want something like this near your body or near your mouth? But I've also had residents who would think that the toothbrush is maybe a razor, is maybe a hairbrush. Their perception is changed. So, people living with dementia respond to what they believe is happening, not necessarily what is actually happening. And if someone believes they are in danger, the reaction to that danger can be very real. If you thought someone was coming after you with this, what would you do? You would fight them off, right? You would say, get away from me. You would get really angry and defensive. Any of us would if we felt threatened. So, what do we do? How do we help? The most important thing to remember is that dementia-related behavior and aggression is always a form of communication. Okay? So, one of the biggest mistakes we can make is focusing on the behavior. And so if a resident starts yelling and refusing care and hitting and pacing and becoming agitated, our instinct is often to stop the behavior. But in dementia care, we have to become detectives. The behavior is the clue, and our job is to find the cause. There are typically 3 triggers to dementia-related behavior. Okay? They fall under generally 3 categories. So that is your medical and physical, your environmental, and your emotional, psychological. Okay? So sometimes the behavior starts in the body. So let's think, what are some physical or medical reasons that someone might display a behavior? Let's think of some together. Maybe if they are in pain. Maybe if they're feeling hungry. Maybe if they have a UTI. That can certainly affect behavior, can't it? Yes. So infections, sicknesses, illnesses, hearing loss, vision changes, all of these things are physical or medical triggers that can cause the behavior. Okay? So many people living with dementia can no longer clearly communicate what hurts or what they need or what they're experiencing. They may also be confused about what is happening around them. So as the dementia progresses, the behavior may become their way of communicating, like we just discussed. So let's think about this. Let's become detectives. Mrs. Jones begins swinging during a transfer. Okay? All right. Is she aggressive? Does she have anything PRN? No. We don't have to medicate. We don't have to medicate right off. Does her shoulder hurt? Is she confused about what we're trying to do? Does she think she's falling? Is she frightened because she doesn't understand what's happening? The behavior may be the only way she knows how to communicate. Okay? So let's talk about environmental triggers. Sometimes the environment becomes overwhelming. So what are some things in the environment that can trigger behaviors? All right? So if we have a very loud TV, loud noises, crowds, bright light, too many directions, an unfamiliar caregiver, being rushed, change in routine, all of these things can be environmental triggers. And sometimes we, as caregivers, accidentally become part of that trigger. So what feels routine to us may feel frightening and overwhelming to them. Let's talk about emotional and psychological triggers. Sometimes the behavior starts with a feeling. So what emotions might be underneath a behavior? Fear, anxiety, loneliness, we've talked about all those. Grief is also a big one, even what we call perceived grief. Doesn't have to be that in their mind, their loved one might have just passed away and they may be reliving that over and over again, okay? This can be a trigger. Loss of control, feeling misunderstood, feeling unsafe. But we also have to talk about past trauma. Past traumas can be emotional and psychological trigger. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The behavior we see may not be about what's happening right now. It may be how the situation makes them feel, okay? So Mrs. Johnson is sitting comfortably and content, enjoying an activity. A caregiver walks up and says, "Come on, it's shower day. We need to take a shower before lunch. Stand up, let's go," okay? So Mrs. Johnson begins yelling, "Leave me alone." Okay, we've heard that plenty of times. She starts resisting care. So why is Mrs. Johnson resisting care? What could be causing it? Let's put our detective hats on and think about it. So we know that caregiver approach would be a huge factor in the resistance, and being rushed to take a shower in the middle of the day with a stranger is not Mrs. J's idea of a good time, okay? But let's be detectives. Let's think this through. Does she have a medical or physical trigger that's causing this behavior? Could she be in pain? Could she just be tired? Could she have an infection? Is there an environmental trigger? Being rushed, interrupted activity she enjoys, sudden approach, feeling cold or the thought of being cold and unclothed. Maybe the caregiver's harsh approach. Does she have an emotional or psychological trigger? Fear, embarrassment, loss of control and independence, or past trauma of abuse, or a caregiver reminds them of an abusive family member. These things can happen. It could also be past trauma of a shower gone wrong. But wait, I thought they couldn't remember that. They can. Emotional memory is still very strong for those living with Alzheimer's and related dementia. They may not remember the details or why they feel the way they do, but their body reacts and their body remembers. They know something just feels off or feels very unsafe and threatening. They remember how you made them feel and whether or not they feel safe with you. So be sure to use that to your advantage and not your disadvantage. Let's also remember that dementia affects perception. Mrs. J may not understand why someone wants her clothes removed. Okay? She may feel that she is unsafe. She believes the caregiver is a stranger. Okay? She believes the water is threatening in some way. Or the shower is not a shower but a closed space with no way out, triggering a primal instinct of feeling cornered. And add a few more caregivers to the room to help, and you can really turn up the instinct. So who doesn't like an audience when they're taking a shower, right? All right, so what is the goal here? Prevention is key. So what can we do to prevent behaviors? What do we accidentally do to make them worse? Okay? So sometimes the resident isn't the only thing we need to assess. Sometimes we need to assess our own approach. And that's where this pink flower comes in. Okay? So this right here is the Home Bloom Dementia Pathway. This is one of the programs that we use at Homemade Caregivers that I've been able to develop for our caregivers. And below here is one of the tools that we use, which is the Pink Petal Pathway. These are some tools to help us better interact with those living with Alzheimer's and dementia and have more successful outcomes, okay? So let's talk about the first one, pace yourself. Each one of these petals spell out the word petal, okay? So number one is pace yourself. So pace yourself is about, of course, not rushing and slowing down, reducing your urgency and giving space. But what's most important about pacing yourself is, I know it can feel like you've got so much to do, so many people to take care of, so many people to feed, so many people to bathe, okay? I get it. I have been exactly where you are. I have the academic knowledge and I've gotten these credentials, but I have been a caregiver and I have been memory care leadership, and I get how hard this is. And that's why I've created this, to make things easier on you, okay? So when you rush care and you are in a hurry, you're actually going to take longer to do these things. But why? Because if you come up to someone with Alzheimer's or related dementia and you start rushing them to get up, let's go, and you're trying to get them on, your time frame and all, and they're just not having it. They clam up, and a lot of times it takes much longer to get the object completed, or it's going to be an unsuccessful attempt altogether, and you cannot get it done. So that's why pace yourself, slowing down, be very mindful of your approach is so important, because it saves you time. And when you're in a rush and you've got a lot to do, it's hard to think of that. But try to remember to pace yourself, to come from the front where they can see you so that they feel safe with you immediately. Number two, enter their reality. This is about not arguing. This is about not overcorrecting. This is about focusing on how they feel and meeting them where they are. Okay? This is so important to we as caregivers who do not have Alzheimer's or dementia, we are flexible. We can go into their reality. They cannot come into ours. Logic and reasoning is not something that they can do on the same level that we can. Okay? No matter how much you try to correct them, no matter how much you argue with them, you're not going to get them to see reason in the same way that you're hoping to. Okay? All right, so trust before task. This is really important. We want to get to know our residents. We want to get to know things about them so that we can come and sit down beside them. Hey, how are you doing? Hi. And we can make that connection with them. We know something about them. We tell them who we are. Hi, I'm Tiffany. And we know something about them, and we bring that up, and we do everything and talk about everything but what we want them to do. Maybe we want them to eat. Maybe we want them to take a shower. But we don't lead with that. We make that connection first. Okay. So we wait for the right moment, and we don't force. And we make that connection, and we get to know them. Adapt creatively. Be flexible. Be responsive. See the situation through their eyes and understand the fear behind the reluctance. The fear behind the reluctance. Okay? I have a little story that goes along with this. So, when I was in the memory care leadership, we had a resident who I did create a good connection with. She felt very safe with me. And oftentimes she would run out of her room screaming, crying, yelling, and very afraid. Okay? Very, very afraid. The caregivers were trying to change her clothes, get her ready for the morning. And she would come around screaming, hollering, and come running to me. Okay? So I would get her calmed down. I would take her back to her room. We would talk about other things. I would calm her. And she was a very private person. She was not someone who wanted you to help her get dressed, to help her take a shower. It scared her so badly. Very modest lady. But she needed to be changed out of her pajamas. Okay? So I got her calmed down. We talked about everything but changing clothes. And she went into the bathroom, and I said, okay, here's your clothes. I'm going to set them right here so that you can change out of your pajamas into, your clothes for today. I know full well that she's not capable of doing that by herself. But it's about giving her dignity in that moment to a lady who has done this her entire life. And it's also about cueing. Okay? Give her a moment. And she's kind of, fumbling around in there and doing her thing. And I'm like, knock. Hey, it's time to get dressed. Here's your clothes. May I come in? Yes. Okay. Yay. That's a win. Okay, I'm allowed to come into her space. Okay. All right, I said, okay, here's your shirt. We're going to change your shirt. Here we go. Oh, no. I said, what's wrong? Well, she was telling me that I don't want to get undressed in front of you. I said, you know what? I said, you trust me, right? And I said, I trust you too. And so I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my eyes. And I'm going to help you, but I'm going to do it with my eyes closed. I said, I trust you, and I know that you're going to help me, and I'm going to help you. This is about adapting creatively and thinking outside the box. So yes, I closed my eyes. I had to peek just a little bit from time to time to make sure I'm doing everything right. But yes, we were able to get it off. She trusted me. And we were able to get those shirts on. We were able to sit her down on that toilet and get those pants on. And boom, she's dressed and out the door. Yay. We had to think of this. We had to understand the fear behind the reluctance. We had to adapt creatively. Okay? We had to give her dignity. Okay? We had to wait for the right moment. We had to have created that connection with her way before this day ever happened. She had to feel safe with me. Okay? So the last thing is leave them with dignity. No shame, no embarrassment, no feeling of being overpowered. Always protect dignity and safety. That is so important because that's what we would want for our own family members. That is what we would want for ourselves. And the statistics show that we may very well be in this same predicament in the future. We have to think about these things. So behind every behavior is a person trying to communicate a need when typical communication has become much more challenging and perceptions have drastically changed. So remember most of all, that they remember how you made them feel every day. So be sure to use that to your advantage and not your disadvantage. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss all this with me today.